Fraser was a journalist. He is an author. And his day job today is Vice-Regal Consort of Canada, of course, because he's married to Governor General Mary Simon. But Whit Fraser I've known for many, many years, and it's really, it's great to have you here and to see you. You're at Rideau Hall, I take it.
In a little corner of Rideau Hall.
Now, just because
where they let me pursue my craft.
you're writing, well, you are pursuing that. The book that I've got in my hand here is True North Rising, and this is really about Whit's time in the North, mostly as a reporter, uncovering that world there, but also covering the Mackenzie Valley Pipeline Inquiry, the Berger Inquiry of the 70s, which was just life-changing for the country. So we're going to get into all of that. He went on to become chair of the Polar Commission and executive director of a national Inuit organization. So we'll talk about all that. So True North Rising. But your latest venture is called Cold Edge of Heaven, a story of love and murder in the Arctic. Is this your new career?
Well, yeah, let's make it my new career.
Well, hold it up. Let's see, because oh yeah, there you got it.
And the Cold Edge it's a novel. It's
Yes.
Historical fiction. And maybe we'll talk about it later, but it's historical fiction. But True North Rising is really the memoir of those northern years and the incredible people that I met, worked with, and people, Pamela, who shaped me, you know.
Absolutely, and the country. I love this story. You met when in one of your early trips up there, you're talking to a young man named Tagak Curley. Am I saying that? Tagak Curley?
Yes, you are.
So he's kind of the unofficial father of Nunavut. And he was explaining to you that he was looking, he was going to lead the call for an Eskimo land claim settlement, to which Whit Fraser said, "What the hell is a land claim?"
Exactly. And what a wonderful time it was. Because this skinny young guy, who's still a friend, skinny young guy in a striped white shirt walks in off the street and introduces himself and makes the declaration. And, we talked for a half hour or so. I put the microphone under his chin. And that night on the local news and on the national news, Daggett got exactly what he wanted. He wanted to tell people what was happening. That the Inuit and at the same time the Dene and the Métis had come to the end of the colonial line. The sleeping giant was awakened, and they were demanding their rights and their land claims. And from then on, the North, thankfully, has never been the same.
You got there almost by accident. I mean, you're born in Miragamish, Nova Scotia. That's Pictou County, that area.
We'll be so pleased in Miragamish to hear that.
So, and I think you joined the Air Force when you're young. Everybody says get out and get a job, and you had a young family, etc. You kind of an accidental journalist, though. Everything
was fate and good luck. No management, just good luck and following my instinct. And I didn't even go north as a reporter. That was the remarkable thing. I went as was called an announcer operator. That meant I was expected to read what was in front of me and make sure all the buttons were in the right places. And the station manager, who I came to at first resented, but who I came to feel very attached to as years went by, Ted Morris said, "You're going to be our new reporter." And I wanted to leave. I didn't know what to do. But I had been in the Air Force only the day before, so I saluted and said, "Aye, aye, sir." And Ted threw me into the deep end, very cold pool, but the only pool where I could swim naturally.
Yeah. I mean, at that time, we think about Northern coverage now and the CBC, and there's all sorts of people. You have greater access, certainly, not, we'll get into that about what still needs to be done. But when you first arrived, what were you arriving to?
There were about a half dozen in the station. All of the Southern program was either on tapes and the newscasts or on shortwave, and we'd be trying to tune the shortwave in as, and it was radio, all radio.
Yeah, yeah.
As the World at 6 would be on, and we'd be trying to keep it tuned in with the static and the scratching, and some days it would fade away for a couple of days at a time. But it was bare bones broadcasting at the very minimum. But every room, it seemed, in the North, every kitchen, every living room, every restaurant, every countertop had a radio.
Yeah.
That radio was constant all day, all night, everywhere we went. And you knew that you were such a part of the community. And people were tuned in, and they were tuned in all of the languages, especially later in Yellowknife, when the Berger Inquiry came along.
Yeah.
We began broadcasting in English, the Inquiry in English, and 6 Aboriginal languages. And the CBC never moved back from that thing. But radio was everything.
Yeah. You tell an incredible story where you had 4 or 5 of your friends, they were Inuit, I think all Inuit, maybe not, that they were supposed to be part of this coverage, and they had very strict time limits. You said you can't make mistakes. You've got to speak only 5 minutes long, and it's got to all be sent down. And it just like amazingly worked.
They stepped up to the camera. None had been on television before.
Ever.
One had a radio experience.
Yeah.
One was a preacher from the pulpit. He could deliver. But from a 20-year-old to a 67-year-old, they delivered 5 minutes, bang on, no retakes, no hums or haws or anything. And every technician in the room at the end, because we had a big CBC crew there for the opening day, and they all applauded at the end. The performance that these guys had given. But that's why they were hired. They were the best at the job because they were gifted communicators their entire life, that were comfortable in their own languages, which were oral languages, and not like the English reporter depended on putting it on the script and sticking to the script. They were gifted communicators. And throughout this very complicated inquiry, people said at the beginning, "Wait, you're going to kill these guys. I mean, you're never going to make it through all this complicated environmental and engineering evidence." And I venture to say that our broadcasters most days were ahead of the curve if the issue was the environment. They argued with the scientists. They gave the scientists information. The scientists didn't have people on everything from where whales were born as to how the pipe was going to perform in the permafrost. They understood that environment thoroughly. They understood the issues thoroughly. And when Berger's took his inquiry into the communities, there was a very solid understanding of this complicated proposal inside the communities themselves. And Tom Berger often gave the Indigenous broadcasters credit for making the inquiry a success at once.
Let's just go back and set the stage a bit, because you and I are of an age that we remember this. This was a seminal time in the news coverage of the North and our understanding in the South of the North. What led to all of this? We've gone to your friend who said, we want land claims. We want to talk about this. How did we get to the Mackenzie Valley Pipeline inquiry, and how did Thomas Berger get this job, and just give us a bit of context.
Let me see if I can give you the short version, because I do a thing
it is a long
40 minutes on this, but The government of Canada in 1969 came out with two, what was called white papers.
Mhm.
One was to assimilate Indigenous people. The white paper on Indian affairs would get away from the Department of Indian and Northern Affairs. And the reaction to that across the country was extreme, especially from the Indigenous peoples.
Right.
6 months later, a second paper on Northern affairs said that the great wealth of the North was going to be now developed in the interests of all Canadians. That was a speech made by Mr. Chrétien in Yellowknife, with not a mention of the rights of Indigenous people or the majority of the people that lived there. But then why would they mention those rights? Because the 6-month paper earlier said there was no such a thing as Indigenous rights. All Canadians were equal. Well, as I said a few minutes ago, the sleeping giant was awake,
Mhm.
and people organized in a way that nobody ever believed possible. And it divided the territories, bitterly divided the territories on two sides, pro-development, anti-development, and the Indigenous people were called anti-development. And therefore, they were even less Canadians than they'd been before the pipeline and the resource announcement was made. It was nobody's surprise in early 70s that 26 oil companies would come along and say they want to build the biggest pipeline ever built anywhere in the world. That was no surprise. But the territory was so divided, and to its credit, the federal government was now backing away from its proposals.
Yeah.
Certainly backed away earlier, again to its credit, from the assimilation policy. And it needed a referee in the North. And the gavel went to Tom Berger. He's a 40-some-year-old.
Yeah, I was going to say he was a
Supreme
young
Court
guy.
judge, really
Take
young guy. He had made a name for himself bringing the first cases of Aboriginal rights to the Supreme Court, and he won a partial victory in the Supreme Court. The federal government was in a minority. Some say the NDP forced the government to do the inquiry and made Berger the chairman. I know nothing of that. Nobody really knows for sure what happened. But he landed, and he took his time, and he listened to all of the environmental evidence, and he listened to all of the 30 or more communities along the Mackenzie Valley. And we said at the beginning that that inquiry would have as much impact on the North as the advent of the wheel and the track. And it really did.
Yeah.
And soon it was not about the steel pipe and the frozen ground. It was about the people that lived there and the future of the North. And just to wrap it up, at the end of this inquiry, Berger didn't say no to a pipeline. And he found a way to give something to 3 irreconcilable differences.
Yeah.
The Indigenous people, he said, there should be no pipeline for 10 years until the land claims are settled, period. He said there should never be a pipeline along the environmentally sensitive Arctic coast because of the wildlife. It's a great Arctic Serengeti, and all of the benefits are in the United States and all of the risks are Canada. So we should stay the hell out of it. And then he said to the oil companies, if the oil is in the national interest, it's possible to put a pipeline along the Mackenzie Valley, along the Alaska Highway and go that route. And after 10 years, the Mackenzie Valley itself is tough enough to take a pipeline if you wouldn't follow safeguards. So he gave everybody something, but mostly he gave a voice to, and that time for the Indigenous people to get their land claims settled and be in a position to take advantage of what development comes. And that's where we are today. There's still no pipeline, but there's very strong Indigenous and local and municipal governments across the territory.
And looking to be part of to be beneficiaries of any development that goes on rather than sort of tossed to the side.
Exactly, rather than the boom jobs, some executive jobs.
Yeah.
And decision jobs on where and how, at what rate that a development should go, and where are the royalties and who shares in the wealth. And but beyond that, beyond that, um, when the inquiry was happening, from a government point of view, there were still appointed members from Ottawa in the NWT Legislative Assembly, then called a government, as the equivalent of assistant deputy minister, was the government. And Stuart Hodgson said more than once, I am the government. Before the inquiry was even over, there was a fully elected NWP Legislative Assembly. The root and branches for the land claims and the constitutional negotiations that came later that put Indigenous rights into the Constitution, I believe the root and branches are in the inquiry. Many of the young leaders earned their spurs and sharpened their wits at the inquiry. Right forward even to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the first person they talked to was Berger. How do you do an inquiry that involves it? So it's the impacts are still there, although young people may not even know it exists.
Well, that was part of the conversation, even speaking to the younger folks in my office. It's like, what's the Berger Inquiry, right? Because it did, as you say, it's the root and branch for all the discussion we're having today, but that part of it is history now, right?
And that's why I've never sat down. I mean,
no, it's a
some
really
stories need to be retold, and stories told for the first time.
Part of I was so interested in reading the book because, I mean, again, I did know you at that time, but you embraced the North, and they, more interestingly, embraced you, and that's kind of rare. There were
so a lot of people say that.
No, I don't mean personally, but here you were the guy from the South, and I can't remember now which one of your friends said, one of your Inuit friends, and I think you were in the South at the moment, but he kind of put his arm on your shoulder and he said, here's my friend Whit, he's from the South. I'm from the North, and he's going to live 10 years longer than me because of that.
That was Josie Kusagak, and he was my boss. We're 20 years ahead now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around.
But Josie was appearing before the federal and provincial health ministers, and he's making that case about the discrepancies between the North and the South.
Yeah.
And I was working with him, and I can tell you, I had Josie a great speech. He didn't touch the speech. Instead, he did what you said. He put his hand on my arm and said to the ministers, this is Whit, many of you know him. And your own statistics say that the life expectancy, he will live 10 years longer than me. Now that's a community.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of talent that we had all the way around. So,
but you built that relationship by going there and sticking it out. And I didn't know this, and I don't know if I didn't remember it or what, but you did sort of at the inquiry, at the Berger Inquiry, you did the original mic drop.
Did I ever?
Yeah, did you ever? So just tell us that story, because it's amazing that you carried on with your career after that.
What did you do in the war, Daddy? I said, why? We were in a village named Norman Wells, an oil town in the Mackenzie Valley.
Yeah.
In an oil town since the 1920s. It would be no surprise that every single person in that town wanted that fight. Their lives depended on it. And I understand that. But they were all newcomers too. But they wanted that pipeline more than anything. And they didn't talk about the merits of the pipeline as much as they talked about racist comments, ugly comments about the people that were sitting in the North. And then I knocked the mic from the fence. And There was a pause and I walked to the front, squeezed my ass into a little school chair that was the witness table. And poor Tom, he didn't know what the hell to do. So he called a recess.
I mean,
And
you
I think
literally threw your pen and your microphone down. You're sitting there as a reporter.
like this,
Damn it, I'm going to testify.
in a way I'm, and anyway, Tom called a recess and Ian Scott, his commission counsel, who became an attorney general in Ontario later on,
Ontario, yeah.
candidate for the Ontario local leadership. Scott said, you know what the hell you're doing? And I said, not really, but I'm doing it. So we had a couple of minutes. He asked me to think, do you know what you're doing? And I didn't, but I did it anyway.
Yeah.
And I was wrong to do it as a reporter. And all I really said was, on over the speech, my only regret is that it was long and rambling, could have been more tight and concise. But the message was, we live in a majority. People of this country, the indigenous people, are the majority. And if they don't want the pipeline, neither do I. I thought it was motherhood.
Yeah.
Got a great big round of applause. And I convinced everybody I'd converted the whole town. Everything was changed. And it was really fist pounding in the thing. And there were demands that I not only be fired, but I be removed completely and entirely from the north, my family and everybody, run out of town and away. And that was a sense of how bitter people were and how much racism there was. And the CBC stopped it.
Yeah, amazing.
But I put the whole broadcast in jeopardy, and I shouldn't have done it, but I don't regret doing it. And I told my bosses, I said, well, I won't tell you that I'll never do it again, but I'll give you the courtesy of the resignation. That's what we started on.
Yeah.
And so we finished with the inquiry, but you know, there's so many good people in the world, and the CBC did its own investigation, and I found this out years later from the managers, that the head lawyer for the Canadian Arctic Gas Company, a man named Pierre Genet, they came to talk to Genet, and Genet said, I don't have any trouble with Fraser's report or with his reports. His reports are very fair. In fact, some days he goes the other way.
Yeah.
There's been community hearings where no one has said a single word in favor of the pipeline, and in every broadcast he's put our proposal in context.
Yeah.
As he said the context, he said, and besides, I know that Justice Berger isn't going to write his report on recommendations on Whit Fraser's broadcast. He's going to make them.
Correct. Right.
But he could have done me in, and
Yeah.
he did. And there are really good people on all sides of every issue.
Yeah. You had, I mean, your time there was, and you wrote about this very frankly too, and you say that alcohol remains the scourge of the North, and it was the scourge of Whit Fraser too.
Almost, yeah, almost. Today, when people offer me a drink, I just totally respond with a line. So thank you very much, but I've had enough alcohol to last me a lifetime, and all I do now is put in the mix. But really, that's what I was, because the time I was 28, I had had enough alcohol to last me a lifetime, and I was at a crossroads. Took the right path, luckily, and still do. After 50 some years, still glad of the decision I made.
Yeah.
But that's my story. But I wrestled whether I should tell it, but I needed to tell it because I needed to be honest all the way through the book. And,
well, I thought it was very powerful, but it also led you to tell the story of the problem in the North, that there's the violent crime in the North is 10 times the national average, and sexual abuse and youth suicide, but 90% of these crimes, you believe, involve alcohol, and it's a problem.
It's a scourge of the North, it still is, and it's not to say that Southern Canada
No,
is
exactly.
immune from these as well, but
No, of
but
course.
it is what it is, Pam, as they say.
Yeah.
That's my story.
A
I got a
hundred,
lot of help and encouragement from you.
yeah, and I want to just come to that because here we are today, and we're still talking about the North. In fact, in some ways, it's become a focus again, separate and apart from Northern issues because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And so we're constantly looking back to say, are we ready? I mean, that's the front line of dealing with Russia and even China in some cases. And we don't have any defenses there, and it's still a very small population. Is this roughly true? 120,000 people and 4 million square kilometers, 40% of our country.
And yes, and when I went north, there wasn't quite 50,000 people,
Yeah,
the same job. So,
it's just
it's huge.
incredible.
We came back last night. We went to Yacht with the president of Germany.
Okay.
We went to see the North. He came to Ottawa, he went to Vancouver, he did industry stuff all across in two places. But he wanted to see the North, so we met him in Yellowknife. And then we flew in 2.5 hours to the Arctic Ocean. Where a community is as united today and determined today to save their community of climate change and the erosion that kills houses and beaches. The gravel's being washed away every year, they're losing ground. They need a big program to save them, so they're trying to save their community. President Steinmeier is very interested in the environment. And so I know that he had a wonderful trip and he saw
Yeah.
for the first time, walked out on the Arctic Ocean, the frozen Arctic Ocean with community members. The grandsons and granddaughters, some of them, of people who mesmerized Tom Berger with their
Yes,
stories.
they're
about
still
how
there.
wonderful that was. But here they are fighting on a different front now, but every bit is determined and using all of today's modern technology, wisdom to do that. Very articulate.
It's real. I mean,
Circle, it's a wonder. It was a great little story for me, and I said, I'd like to do this story, so now I'm doing it.
no, I wish every Canadian can do it. I had the very good fortune. I mean, obviously, we've been in the North covering election campaigns, but I flew with the Air Force to Alert, to our most northern, well, the North Pole, as close as you're going to get. And it's hard to describe the vastness, the breathtaking beauty, it's stunning, and we all claim it when we live down here. Oh, we're a northern nation, but you really need to see it.
Yeah, well, I said to the German president, when he was sitting on a plane, I got a little map and I showed him where Chuck is. Said, "Now here it is."
Yeah.
And just over here, no, just a little bit south, and over on this side, east, is Baker Lake. And I pointed Baker Lake. Now Baker Lake, Mr. President, is the geographic center of Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
So you get, when we're on top, remember, you've got more than 1,000 miles of real estate north of you.
Yeah.
And it was mind-boggling to him and
Yes,
and to Canadians still.
Yeah.
How this country is.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in all this time up there, you also managed to run into a young woman.
I met a girl.
You met a girl.
Yeah.
Mary May, and your paths continued to cross here and there.
Well, that's a good story. And
Well,
It's our lives. Look,
yeah.
who knew? People always want to ask me, how did you and Mary meet? I'm always pleased to tell the story, and I know that people like the story. But back at the very dawn of those land claims that we talked about, Retired had one of his first big annual meetings of Inuit from all across the country in Cambridge Bay in 1973. And I go to cover it for CBC, walk into the school gym. There's about 400 Inuit there. And the meeting, everything is in Inuit.
Yeah.
Without being translated, but they had a translator. And the translator was this gorgeous young woman from northern Quebec named Mary May. And I asked Mary May if she would help me out with the names and pronunciations and translations.
You sweet talker, you.
Yeah, your old sweet doctor. And she's still helping me with translation. So anyway, it may have been love at first sight, but it was also recognition that we were both married.
Yeah.
Both had small families, but a friendship and a spark was there. Of that there is no question. And fate would cross our paths 100 times over the years until we met in 1990 or 91 at a going away party from former boss of both of us. Because she had worked at CBC for a little while. And we will both find ourselves in different lives, and very soon we will go on stage. And then here we are. And who knew?
Yes, you always call her, and I love these stories in the book too, that she's your cover girl. There was a picture of her in a magazine, and she was described as a winsome little miss.
Yeah, I wish I had the picture, but she is in her clothing that her mother made her pack and comics, and the picture was taken by a great photographer. Who was a friend of the family.
I'm just going to hold this up here.
That's great.
It's not a great picture, but that
Winsome Little Miss. And
the Winsome Little Miss.
Well, that was the old Hudson Bay, and she was the cover girl of the Hudson Bay Company's Moccasin Telegraph. If you were on the cover of Moccasin Telegraph, you're somebody, even if you're something.
Yeah.
I never got on the cover of Moccasin Telegraph.
Now, our Governor General, first Indigenous Governor General, Mary Jeannie May, but this is the other name she holds, E9-761. Explain that.
Every Inuit for a long time, from I guess pre-1940s through until 1970, when they were born, they were given a discipline. And in the book, I deal with that. Not very respectful of two colleagues that I worked with, Abel Pick and Jonah Kelly, who railed against being known by a number. What am I, a dog? Jonah Kelly would ask a politician. And so it was Abe who worked with me during the Berger Inquiry that in 1969 and 70 visited every community across the area and recorded people's family name. Some families took two names. Some took a grandfather on his mother's side or a grandmother on his dad's side. But they decided on their names, and with one swoop of a pen, a Supreme Court judge in the Northwest Territories did a name change. Some history was made, and that in itself was the beginning also at the end of the block colonization, where people were taking their name and their language, and then very soon after that, they were no longer Eskimos, they were Inuit. The Indians of the Mackenzie Delta, Mackenzie area, they declared themselves of their name, Dene, and then later nationally became First Nations. But the people that did those things are, what I'm proud to say, are in the book. And I'm even more proud to say how good friends they are.
Are you, as we sit here in 2023, are you optimistic?
I got to be. I was optimistic from the beginning. Of course I am, because I don't think the challenges could be any greater today than they were in the 1960s with the colonialism.
Yeah.
With let's pass a bill like just take away the government's limits. With let's develop the living bejesus out of the Arctic and get every drop of gas out there
Yep.
for the interests of all Canada and the 90 people that do that. So when you can stand up to that, well, stand up. So yeah, I am optimistic, and I'm even more optimistic every year when I see the number of kids getting through high school and into university, post-secondary education.
Yeah. Is the
Young people come to talk to Mary, and
yeah.
sometimes they stop and say hi to me, and there's some really struggling young people that are emerging all across the north. So yeah, I mean,
Well, it's amazing that they've got the I hate the phrase, but the role model. She's there. It's now possible. She's got the top job. So it's doable.
yeah, it is. And I think young people recognize that, and we saw that certainly. We saw it in tough just 2 or 3 days ago.
Yeah.
And, he doesn't say much to me, but I read her face, and she gets a lift back. So it's,
Yeah, I'm sure.
It really helps. Keeps you going. Keeps
Now,
you going.
when it's hard to imagine Whit Fraser going to Vice Regal boot camp, but I'm sure they they had to train you up a bit.
No, Billy. Oh, yeah, they did. I read the books, and I learned it very quickly to keep my tongue in check rather than in cheek.
Yes.
Start from out here with a knife and fork, and but it's a great gift. It's just a great
Yeah.
gift to be able to do this.
Well, you wrote to one of the journalistic colleague, well, maybe not a colleague at the time, but somebody in contemporary journalism when everybody was going on about Mary Simon not being bilingual, and you wrote the note and said, "Excuse me, yes, she is."
I don't mind. And we talked about it not long ago. It was John Ibbiston.
Yeah.
For the Globe, and that story was when David Johnson was appointed Governor General. John wrote that there was a lot of speculation that it may have been Inuit leader Mary Simon.
Yeah, yeah.
But she was passed over because she was not bilingual. And I just gently reminded him that, and made the point that are we going to be in a case in the country where the expectations on Indigenous people are going to be even higher? And they need to be trilingual?
Yeah.
Because when Mary was into, I'll give you this example, another story that I would have liked to read about broadcast. We went to one of the communities in the Kangasoo-Lutchwa, George River, the area where she was born. And there was 400 rambunctious kids in the gymnasium, crawling all over one another like kids do. And principals are trying to keep order in the school, but the Governor General was there, and kids are being kids. And the Governor General stands on the stage of the auditorium, and the first words that come out of her mouth are when, you know, you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
Bang. And all these active little hyper kids, their mouths are all wide open, like gasp. Somebody speaking to them.
Yeah. That's powerful
The
stuff.
school teacher was a beautiful, is a vice principal, you know, he was running around Lisa's face. She said, that's where we are. And And that's trying to set aside all my biases and all of that, but that's when she came into it, I think, at the very right team, the right person, at the right time. There was a great lift from other people, and it didn't just people. And it shows a different kind.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of when she's traveling into history.
And it doesn't matter what you do, there's always going to be stories about, the breakfast is too expensive or the orange juice is $16 and whatever. You have to kind of let it roll.
You have to let it roll, exactly. And there's only one element of the media in my mind I'm going to say it, that's small-minded. It's the newspaper that's 66% owned by a hedge company
Yeah.
somewhere else. But I don't think Canadians want their prime minister or their governor general to be. If we're not going to do the job and travel the world and do what needs to be done,
Not much point.
in tune with the world, then no
Well,
other country gets through that I see.
yeah, no, it's really true.
I noticed the president's plane land, and it was in a small line.
Yeah, no, I think there was an entourage of around 1,000. Yeah, so that was we pale by comparison.
By comparison.
Yeah, amazing. The fiction book, Cold Edge of Heaven. So
Just happen to have it here.
yeah, you just happen to have it. You've been working. Is this a kind of a secret project you've had for a long time? Like, where did this come from?
Well, I've been doing with a group of students for a number of years, and Mary was part of this too, and then we both gone at different times for a group of students called Students on Ice. And we traveled across the Arctic in the summertime as resource people. And then a Canadian tourist company, Adventure Canada, asked me if I would do the same thing with them. And basically, it's seniors on ice. People my age or our age. And they want to see the Arctic. They want to see it all in their lives. And now they're spending the entire money doing it. And one of the stops is Devon Island.
Yeah.
And Dundas Harbor on Devon Island. And
Where this is set, yeah.
Right about in the middle of the Northwest Passage. And I had been there now 7 times. And the last time in 2019, and it's significant because there's an old RCMP post there. 1920s development of mountains on uninhabited islands to a certain sovereignty. And on the hill was 2 graves where one Mountie took his own life and another died accidentally. And I'm sitting there for several hours because my job on the trip was also in the day job as a polar bear guard. So I'm sitting with my shotgun, making sure no polar bears come around. I was so far in Greenland, Pamela, that the bear could have come up and eaten my lunch, and I wouldn't have known the difference. So there I am, the brave polar bear guard with an imagination. And when I came away that night, I had a novel in my head.
Wow.
I brought in a family and mixed it with the Mounties as guides. And I brought in 100 or 1,000 places and adventure with people and everything that I experienced over the last 50 years and wove it all together into this novel. It's called The Cold Edge of Heaven. But it's based on some historical context, especially the desperation in the 1920s to assert sovereignty. And everything is still off engaged in sovereignty.
Yep. It's amazing. Well, I'm so glad you've done that. That's my my next book. When we get through all the legislation, I'm going to start. That's what I try and do in the summer is catch up. So
It's good book for the summer because it'll cool you off.
Hold up the cover there. Hold up the
All
cover.
right,
So you
how's
can see
that?
it. Okay. So
Old edge of it.
I'll post a review when I'm done reading.
All right,
We'll see how that goes. But honestly, I do think everybody should read this. Because if you've never had an experience of being there, it's true insight. It's a powerful bit of history. As Whit has said, and I know I should be referring to you as Your Excellency, but we'll do that formally at the top and the bottom, and the rest of the time it's just the guy I've known for a long time.
Senator.
Yeah, so thank you so much for doing this. Whit Fraser, Vice-Regal Consort of Canada. Are you going to the coronation?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
They were trying to shine me up a little bit this morning. So, yes.
But this is great. You've got some great moments ahead, eh?
Yeah, it is great. Yeah, it is great.
I mean, we all got to cover a lot of stories as journalists, but then when you go in this official way, it's a whole other vantage point, isn't it?
You don't have to file when it's all
over. That's true enough. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pam, very much.
Yeah, journalist, author, and of course, the Vice-Regal Consort of Canada. We'll talk again soon for another edition of No Nonsense with Pamela Wallin.